It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
They totally want to give people access to your money. And one of the easiest ways they know is that we know people have saved for retirement, but it's locked up until you reach 59 and a half. So they've created some unique things within retirement account distributions.
Now, before we start explaining to you planning opportunities here, we're going to talk about efficiencies and opportunities. But remember, the reason that you save for retirement is to cover the expenses for your future self. So if you have to begin using retirement assets now, you're essentially borrowing from your future self. So if you're in an emergency, that's okay. That's what's necessary. But, measure twice and cut once, because this can have long-lasting implications. And so when we look at the retirement account distributions, we kind of broke them down into three different levels that they have addressed. The first is what we're going to call coronavirus distributions. The second is the 401k loan expansion that they added. And then the third is a really, really big adjustment that they made to required minimum distributions in 2020.
So let's kind of jump into these. And look, Bo said it, and this is also might sound a little tone deaf, but I think it's worth repeating. If I had my way, people won't touch their retirement accounts because this is money that 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, you're going to need this money to provide for you. But I also know the reason I think that might be a little tone deaf, people are hurting.
People need it.
So I'm willing to give you the grace. I understand the need. So that's why we want to cover this and tell you how to do it in the best possible way. Sure. But I wouldn't be your good buddy who you come and share a cup of coffee with that talks about good financial management if I didn't tell you that this ought to be viewed as a very dangerous tool, because this money was not just earmarked like I was thinking this was a good idea. This is money that was going to be what provides for you once you quit working. Yep. So you just need to view this as a very dangerous tool and make sure you're making the best of it. So the first thing, and this is kind of unique, coronavirus distributions. What is interesting about this coronavirus distributions is that they wrote the law in a way that, if you've had COVID-19, if you've had a relative that had COVID-19, if your employer was impacted, they have a whole list. And then they even put at the bottom that the IRS has latitude to even make additional decisions. If I had to read the tea leaves, I think that this is probably going to be kind of read as a very pretty liberal, open type distribution thing. So 2020 is going to turn out to be a very unique year, because what they're going to allow you to do is access your retirement accounts without penalty.
That's right. If you remember, one of the things that is unique about retirement accounts is if you go to access those dollars before certain thresholds are met, usually it's like 59 and a half or something like that. If it's a pre-tax account, not only will you have to pay ordinary income tax on that, but you also normally have to pay a 10% penalty. What the government said is we're going to waive the penalty. You'll still have to pay taxes on the account, but we're going to waive the penalty so that you can access those dollars if you need to get to them.
And here's the other thing that's kind of unique is that they let you, if you access this money, they said, look, this is going to be taxable. We're going to waive the penalty, not waive the taxes, but we are going to give you 3 years to spread the income taxes. You can spread the income taxes on this distribution over 2020. Tax year 2021 and tax year 2022. So you do have a decision to figure out how you want to deal with the 3 year. And then here's the other part, talking about 3 year, which is awesome. Typically, when you take money out of a retirement account, if you go, whoopsie, I really kind of wish I wouldn't have done that because this is important money that I need for the future. You have 60 days to put the money back into the retirement account, and no mess, no fuss. They consider that you put the money back in. They have done some crazy here. I've never seen this. They wrote in the legislation, you actually have 3 years to pay back this coronavirus distribution.
So normally it was 60 days to do that, and they've extended it now to 3 years, 36 months to get that money back into these retirement accounts.
So that's kind of unheard of. So now you guys are probably trying to, because we talk about financial order of operations all the time, respect the FOO, financial order of operations. You're probably trying to figure out, okay, if I've got this horrible decision, now I got to figure out, do I take pre-tax money? Do I take Roth money, which grows tax-free? What's the right decision to make in that? I want to go a little deeper because I don't hear a lot of people talking about this. And you and I, we're so nerdy. We actually covered this. Is that you and I in our own private discussions, we said, let's talk about these. Let's first kind of lay out what they're good at, what they're not. Roth, what do we love about it is it grows completely tax free.
Supercharged dollars.
We know markets right now are depressed, they're down. So we kind of want that Roth money ready to pounce when it's time to recover. We want those assets to grow tax-free. Now, you can screw up the tax-free growth of a Roth by, yes, you can get to the corpus or your original contributions without taxes. That's why they're always an emergency kind of bank account that we don't really talk about because we want you to leave it alone.
Reserve.
But it is a pseudo backup emergency reserves account. But once you get into the actual earnings, there's a way you can blow up the tax-free part. So you got to be careful with that. But we know that you'd get out of the penalty. So if you're comparing those two accounts, I would tell you financial order of operations. I think you would an emergency financial order of operations. I'd probably rather take tax-deferred money before I take Roth money.
Yeah, again, every single situation is so nuanced because one of the things you'd want to analyze is how much basis do I have in my Roth? Because potentially then I could get to that money unencumbered, right? No taxes. But if I'm having to start pulling out earnings out of my Roth and I am going to subject that to tax and I'm going to lose that future growth, yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think pre-tax might be the first bucket I would go to if the basis in my Roth didn't fit the bill, didn't cover it.
You, of course, always could put the money back in within 3 years, file the amended tax return, get out of the tax consequences. But probably when we hit that slingshot, that rubber band effect of remember, the faster we go down, very likely V-shaped recovery, the faster we go back. We want those Roth assets there to take advantage of the tax-free growth.
So again,
think about that.
This is a great, and so a lot of folks are asking questions that we don't know the answers to, and this is one that we see a lot, and I imagine we'll hit this in the Q&A, but a lot of folks saying, oh, well, I can spread this distribution over 3 years. Should I think about maybe actually doing some financial planning and looking at like Roth conversions and that sort of thing? Remember, in order for the COVID-19 distribution to qualify, there are going to be some things that have to be met in terms of why you took that distribution. You had it, someone else had it, economically affected. If that were the case and you only did it for planning opportunities, I don't know if that's going to fly.
I think you're going to be in a gray zone, and that's what I'm seeing it right now. In a minute, we're going to get to the payroll protection program for businesses. When I read the clarifications coming out of the Treasury Department, it ties into the common sense of what was the intent, what was the purpose, making sure we're not double dipping, making sure people aren't taking advantage of things when we're in a time of need. I would be very careful of using the coronavirus distribution for Roth conversions. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to get to RMDs in a minute, and we'll talk about maybe there is a planning opportunity, but that's not piercing the intent of what the whole thing with this bill is. So just be careful with that. So let's talk about next thing out there is updates to loans from employers.
Yep. So this one is pretty big. There were one of the big changes they made is that previously, if you wanted to take a loan from your 401k or a loan from your employer-sponsored retirement account, it was capped at $50,000. No matter how big the account was, you could only get up to $50,000. Well, they've now doubled that. You can actually go all the way up to $100,000 of a loan. And the second thing that they changed is previously you couldn't borrow up to 100% of the value of your account. There was a threshold that you couldn't cross over. Now you can actually borrow up to 100% of your entire vested account balance. So that's pretty substantial. Again, I think we should put a disclaimer on this. 401k dollars are for the future. They're supposed to be for your future self. They're supposed to grow. When you take your army, your soldiers out of your army of dollar bills, they're not working for any longer. So this is something that you should do with caution and not hastily.
Yeah, and I think there's something we talk about, and Bo, you and I, once another one of our nerdy conversations.
You're making us sound like we're really big. No, we're actually pretty cool
we actually
guys,
live this thing.
like.
I mean, but it is one of those things. I want people to know this is our life. We've been living, breathing this stuff. You ask yourself the question, is it better to take a loan or is it better to take this coronavirus distribution? I mean, and kind of some of the things we've talked about, now I want to qualify this because you're choosing between two not great decisions. I mean, I will tell you, this is not a favored thing that you're like, man, that's a great planning opportunity. This is like when you know you're in a pickle, you need the access, you're trying to figure out what's the lesser of the two problem things that I'm choosing. And loan, in a lot of ways, probably is going to be easier from it. You're not going to pay taxes on it. So we think that maybe there is some opportunity to use a loan before you take a distribution.
Yeah, because ultimately the way that a 401k loan works is you are borrowing the money from yourself and you are paying yourself back an imputed interest rate, whatever the interest rate in the 401k loan is. But the big thing you said is you avoid that tax penalty. When you pull a loan out of a 401k, you're not paying ordinary federal income taxes. You're not paying state income taxes. So perhaps if you needed $10,000, it's easier to get, less cumbersome to get $10,000 out of your 401k than $10,000 out of your IRA. It might be more advantageous from that aspect. But there's some things you got to be careful of.
Well, and I feel bad because I feel like I'm giving and then I'm taking it away because the two things you have to worry about with a loan, there's several things. While you're paying back the loan, typically you're reducing what you're paying into the plan as a contribution. Mm-hmm. So think about it. We have a reduced stock market, a financial market system that is depressed prices. One of the biggest things we talk about that is your friend when in volatile times is dollar cost averaging, buying in a systematic process. When you do the loan, it's going to now take away your ability to maximize that opportunity. And then don't forget, if you do have a career change or a job change, and definitely in volatile times, job changes occur even more frequently. If you have an outstanding loan when you leave the employer, it does become a distribution. And there is a chance, if you think that this could happen, you need to be careful because I don't know that would be classified then as a coronavirus distribution. I
don't know either, yeah.
And you could get yourself and you could miss out on that 3-year spread.
That's right.
So guys, this is complicated stuff. We want to give you all the facets of this. We're definitely trying to be the financial mutants that are thinking about this, giving you all the information. But this might be one, if you're really having to make those decisions, talk to somebody who can take into account all the facets and make sure that you're not missing out. You don't know what your blind spot is and what you're missing out is. Bo, I want to kind of pivot now to RMDs.
Yeah, and I'm so excited about this because I feel like the last two were like, oh, don't do it. That's not awesome. That's kind of emergency. I'm going to argue this RMD is actually a positive one. There's actually some fun planning we can do around required minimum distributions.
I want you to do kind of show them, walk them through. We did a flow chart to kind of give people a decision maker, but then I want to talk about why this is a good part of the legislation.
Yeah, so we're having a lot of people asking us, okay, if I have taken, if I haven't taken, if it's my RMD, if it's an inherited RMD. So again, we thought one of the best ways to lay this out would be in a flow chart. So what we've put together is, if you think about 2020, this present tax year, have you taken your RMD this year? If the answer to that is yes, then the next question you have to ask is, was it from an inherited IRA? If the answer is yes, I've already taken an inherited IRA required minimum this year, you're out of luck. There's nothing you can do about that. You're just kind of stuck. That's unlucky that you did that at the beginning of the year. If it was from your personal assets, though, if you pulled your RMD out in January, February, March from your personal IRA because you are above the age where you have to begin drawing them, you can actually pay it back under the payback rule. So you can actually get that money back in there because the government said we're doing away with all RMDs for 2020. So if you have not taken your RMD this year, whether it's inherited or whether it's from your personal assets, the answer is you can skip this year completely.
Yeah, it's such power. And here's why this is good legislation, guys. Think about it. What are required minimum distributions, whether it's an inherited account or just your own personal account, you've reached the age where the government's requiring you to take these distributions. They're basing these distributions off of 12/31/2019 values. Well, we know 2019 was a great year to be an investor, so those are elevated account values. Now we know the financial markets are way down. So to now take a distribution based on 12/31/2019 values means you're probably eating a lot more of your account value than what was kind of intended by the government. So I applaud them when they come out with these things that says, whoa, we recognize for a lot of retired people, yes, we want the taxation from these tax-deferred accounts, but we also recognize it's probably a little unfair to do this while markets are down. So we want to kind of talk about what are the planning strategies that if this does hit you. The first thing, if you have an RMD coming your way this year and you don't have to have the money for cash flow, skip it.
Because one of the things we talk about for our retired clients every year is, oh man, there's all kinds of planning we want to do, but because you've done such a great job of saving assets, you have so much pre-tax that RMD hits, and there's, we kind of fill up the early tax buckets really quickly by doing that.
Because it lets your account recover. So all that money, you don't have to take that cash flow. So you're going to lower your tax impact. You're also going to allow that account to recover a little longer. Take advantage of the additional time. Now, if you're a person, as Bo has already said, you're going to be able to repay this. Typically, you can repay, like I said, 60 days. But because of the coronavirus distribution, you potentially can go all the way back to January 1st. If you took a distribution already for yourself, you can pay it back. Yep. So if you didn't need the money, we had this phone call with a client yesterday. We were like, let's get it back in there so we can get that account recovered. Take advantage of that opportunity. Now, here's the last one. The planning opportunity that I want to say is a little different. We know account values are down. So that means anything you convert into a Roth IRA this year, it's going to kind of be a turbocharged conversion because you have account values that are depressed, meaning that when you convert them, that you're going to have your tax implications are going to be lower. But then when the market hits its hopeful recovery in the next, few months, when that money booms into recovery mode, if it's already been converted into a Roth, great
Tax-free
planning opportunity. That's tax-free growth on the recovery. So that does create an opportunity. Well, here's the thing. Anybody who takes an RMD, we know that the tax code says, all right, guys, anybody who's over 70 and a half, when you convert money to a Roth, you first have to prioritize. They have their own financial order of operations. They make you pay taxes on your RMD, not counting that towards Roth conversion. You have to do that on top of the required minimum distribution. This year, since there's no RMD, anybody who's over 70 and a half, soon to be 72 under the Secure Act, you can go ahead and do a Roth conversion now, and you don't, since there's no RMD requirement, you can get more money turned into Roth assets.
But if you're gonna do the Roth conversion game, and I call it a game, it's not really a game, it's a planning strategy. Make sure you do it well because there are a lot of implications that can happen with this. I know for a lot of our clients, when we do annual Roth conversion strategies, one of the reasons we wait to do it until November or December is because we have a really good idea of what their year-long income was at that point. Because you have to be careful causing more of your Social Security to become taxable, hopping into new tax brackets, crossing over Medicare surcharges. So if you are going to accelerate and do a Roth conversion earlier in the year to take advantage of kind of where the market is right now, you might want to leave yourself a little bit of wiggle room just so that you don't get too close and cross over one of those thresholds you weren't intending crossing over.
There's a lot of moving parts when you're talking about this, especially when you're retired, because you don't want to trigger exactly what you said, some of those taxation points. Another thing I didn't talk about, but I just briefly want to mention, qualified charitable distributions. QCD is a strategy a lot of people do. You're already required to take an RMD, so a lot of you guys say, but you're charitably minded. You send that money directly to your churches, your charities, and that's great because now that money's not taxable. Your charitable goals get fulfilled. This is an odd year for QCDs, is because first of all, you're not required to take the required minimum distribution, and your assets are probably depressed a little bit. So I just tell you that you can keep, if that's the only way you can give to your charities and you're still charitably minded and it's not breaking you financially, you can continue to do QCDs. There's nothing that takes them away. But just from a planning perspective, cash is king this year. I'm just going to tell you, charitable contributions this year probably more than likely need to be cash. So go and reevaluate how you're doing your charitable goals in 2020.
So as I'm reading through the chat, as the questions are coming in, a really good question has come in, and I want to ask it to you. And I don't exactly know the answer to this. I'm a little nervous about this.
Well, I always like to share the wisdom, assuming it's there.
I have an inkling, right? So a lot of the questions people ask is, hey, okay, I've already taken my RMD and I fall into this camp that I can pay it back. What's the mechanism for paying it back? And I think this is the real question they're asking. I know for most of our clients, whenever we set up required minimum distributions to happen every year, we have some automatic withholding that takes place, whether it be on the federal side or the state side. I would imagine if I want to do this letter of the law, if I want to repay that RMD, I need to pay back not just the amount that I received, but also the amount that was withheld for taxes so I can get it all back in the account, and then I'll probably get that withholding back when I file my tax return. Do you agree with that?
You actually nailed it. That's the thing. It's kind of a whammy in a little bit, is that yes, you have the opportunity to pay the money back, but it's got to be grossed up, guys. Now, look, if you don't have the money and you pay back just a portion, then it will be prorated. The tax impact will be prorated for what you put back into it. But I do think it's one of those things, be aware, If they withheld taxes, if you want to get the full amount so that the 1099-R doesn't show any taxability, you've got to make sure you even gross it back up for the taxes that were withheld. You'll be made whole when you file your taxes, but it's the cruel reality that you have to kind of get all the money back into the account.
He loves it when I let him flex that CPA, doesn't he?
But here's the thing. Bo, you just humble bragged is what you did. That was a humble brag.
No,
I
I
don't
didn't.
know the answer to this. I'm going to answer it, and then I'll throw it over here to the CPA to get the confirmation.
I was like 95% sure that was the
classic
answer.
humble brag. We'll call you out on it, but it's okay. I still think the opportunity was made.